Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thanks very much for the invitation to this very promising event. I would like to address a topic that is of great relevance for the future of work. This applies to employment prospects, social security, and not least to the design of tomorrow workplaces. I will therefore focus on the topic of artificial intelligence, AI, or in other words, machine learning in connection with the workplace. AI is on the political agenda, not only here in Berlin, it's on the agenda worldwide, and for some time it has been on the agenda in Brussels. In December last year, a high-level expert group of the European Commission presented a proposal concerning the issue trustworthy artificial intelligence. This is certainly a worthwhile approach, as many fears are associated with AI in our societies, not only with regard to work in the future, but also concerning social control and even disenfranchisement. The newest Tech Divide study also offers proof of this, reporting that, I quote, more than 50% stated that in the future, machines and not humans will make decisions. At the same time, AI also raises many hopes, particularly regarding the economy and also, for example, the field of medicine. The concept of trustworthy AI begs the question, who is this AI anyway? Of course, AI is not a person. But if we, as a society and as a workforce, are supported to trust in it, then we are obviously dealing with a phenomenon that I like to call the silent revolution. This is a process that is invisible, and yet it penetrates further and further into our lives, including our working lives. What is this about? We are not dealing with a great enigma, but with self-learning machines. And these machines are also, at least for the foreseeable future, made by humans. The decisive factor for learning systems is their objective. And objectives are always determined by humans. And this is the decisive lever of the design of AI-based systems, especially for the workplace. Because this is not just about rationalization. It has never been. And it is a big challenge. It is also, and not least, a question of reconfiguring the interfaces between human and machines, a very ambitious undertaking. What do we want to use artificial intelligence for? And what do we have to take into account in order to achieve the productive coexistence of humans and machines in line with intelligent assistance, with EA? As research also shows, acceptance is an important factor, especially at the workplace. In private life, AI and other digital applications have mainly prevailed thanks to one thing: convenience. Of course, trust in security is also playing an increasing role, as is privacy protection, as the Facebook and Cambridge Analytica cases has shown to us. What is so special about AI systems? They work with personal data invisibly in the background, and even if they offer a considerable potential for influencing, steering, and manipulation, the convenience strategy has nevertheless established itself in the general population. In working life, however, things are quite different. Of course, AI can optimize work processes and thus increase a change of value creation. But what about workforce optimization? Will working conditions made be easier? Or will employees be put under additional pressure because each individual as well as their performance are being selected, measured, and even predicted? Nowadays, this already starts in the recruiting phase. The workplace is not only about convenience, there are other challenges here concerning the use of artificial intelligence. First, even if we improve ergonomics, for example, through personalized, interactive, lightweight robots in assembly, the question always arises as to how else personal data is used. However, without the data, such an assistance system does not work at all, which means that varying interests and conflicting objectives have to be negotiated. Secondly, it is also a question of how autonomously AI systems operate and whether they still offer employees any leeway for decision making. Third, in the end, it comes down to the question of who is responsible for the decision and who is reliable or liable for possible mistakes. AI must therefore not act as a black box in the workplace and certainly not become a panopticon, where employees find themselves in a system of surveillance and permanent probation. Also, there are legal limits here. Technology makes many things possible. It is crucial for us, for the trade unions, to assess the impact of AI, crucial for the way in which occupations change and how skills need to be accordingly adapted, and to assess how pressure can change or will change. Therefore, this is a matter of the objectives of AI. It also concerns the boundaries, the aesthetical boundaries that must be still to limit the use of artificial intelligence. Who determines the objectives and how are employees and their representatives, bodies involved? The answer to this question not only determines acceptance, but also, in case of doubt, employment security and prospects for employees. Our answer to this challenge is empowerment, which represents far more than non-binding participation or information. Empowerment means the early negotiation, for example, co-determination, of the objectives of AI applications in a company, including an impact assessment for work structuring. Only under these circumstances can AI be utilized for what we are calling good work. We, the DGB, present a proposal for this in January this year. We define good work by design as innovative negotiation processes for the development of the implementation of AI, which puts companies in a win-win situation. Digital transition as a whole will be also led to rationalization and job losses. Occupations and professions will disappear. Certainly new jobs will also emerge, but we don't yet know what kind, where and when they will arise. This leads to justified worries about the future. Therefore, this process must be actively monitored and shaped. The good news is that we are at the beginning of a development that we can, and I'm convinced, we must influence in a targeted manner. The trade unions have long time been involved, for example, by working with social partners to modernize education and training. But this situation requires much more. People need security during a transition, and not just better social security. Here too, I mean empowerment. For example, offers for professional mobility, development, and reorientation. The concept of lifelong learning must finally be properly brought to life. To this end, the workforce needs time, money, and a binding right to further vocational training, irrespective to the company. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rainer. Now I'd like to invite Andreas Schleicher, who's head of the Directorate for Education and Skills at the OECD. And Andreas's book, World Class, How to Build a 21st Century School System, is published in German today, I think, Andreas. So congratulations on that. Delighted to hear from you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think Dennis just made a very important point that in the time of artificial intelligence, we need to think a lot harder about what makes us truly human and how we complement, not substitute the artificial intelligence of our computers. And actually at the OECD, that's one of the things we pay great attention to. When we measure the progress of education, we look precisely to those kinds of skills. Your capacity to think for yourselves, your capacity to work with other people. And in a field like science, we started this in the year 2006. Now that's, I know, a very, very long time ago for many of us. No? Just remember, that was the year before the iPhone was invented. Twitter was still a sound. The Amazon was still a river. Now, many of the things we take for granted then did not exist. But actually, when you look at the progress of education to deliver those 21st century thinking skills, very limited. Country even advanced as Germany, and the world didn't stop in 2009. Remember, there was a year when maps became dynamic. Now, cars became electric. They started to drive without drivers in those years. And again, we haven't seen that translated to doing things differently in our education systems. And just imagine the last years, 2012 onwards, cloud computing, big data, robotics, huge developments, biogenetics in knowledge and society. And again, our education systems continue to teach people more stuff, but not to think more deeply. There's some exceptions to this, not everywhere like this, even though the general trend in the OECD is very similar to what you see in Germany. But there are some countries, and you can see a country like Portugal that nobody would have had on our radar screen a decade ago is getting pretty close to a country like Germany. And then Singapore moving from good to great. And some regions in China I could barely put on the map here. So there are changes. But let's look in this in the light of global trends. Within the next decade, we're going to have every second person on the globe actually being part of the middle class. And 8 out of 10 entrants to the global middle class will come from China and India alone. Huge changes in relative terms, and you can see the same thing when you look at this in absolute terms. Global migration, sometimes we think here in Europe we are the center of the global migration flows. In fact, the big migration is now occurring within Asia. Huge trend making our societies more diverse, and what it means in terms of knowledge and skills, our capacity to engage with people who think differently, walk differently, maybe look differently, is becoming increasing. Volatility. We save less, spend more, and we all know in 2008 how this increases insecurity and volatility in our economies. And then you look at digital technologies. We now have more broadband connections in the OECD than we have people. And again, AI. Artificial intelligence. This is the game changer in terms of changing what we need to be successful. If you think about digitalization just for a second, it's incredibly democratizing. Everybody can participate, contribute. But it's also, and we have just heard this, and also incredibly concentrating power at a rate we've never seen before. It's incredibly particularizing. The smallest voice can be heard anywhere in the world, but it's also incredibly homogenizing, squashing individuality, cultural uniqueness. It's incredibly empowering. Actually, Berlin is a great place to show that. all you need today is to have a great idea. You don't know, the biggest companies in the world these days don't start with a big industry. They start with an idea. They have the product before they have the people. These are the changes. But at the same time, we just heard the world of digital slavery. We can become very quickly the hostage of algorithms. Those are the coins, and where you end up on this screen has a lot to do with the knowledge and skills of people. And this is an area where I'm a bit more optimistic than Dennis. I do believe that we have the tools and the capacities actually to equip people, and actually most people with those kinds of skills. But think once more back, 10 years ago, we got the world's most advanced knowledge into our fingertips, and that means the world no longer rewards us just for what we know. Google knows everything. The world rewards us for what we can do with what we know. That's become the big differentiator. Then, virtual reality and the real world began to sort of merge a few years later, and everybody got connected. And that sounds so simple, but actually a lot of things that used to be very easy have become very difficult. Think about literacy. In the past, it was about extracting knowledge that somebody else had written. A simple skill, passive skill. And when you didn't know the answer to a question, you could look it up in an encyclopedia and you could trust the answer to be true. Today, you look up something on Google or Weibo or wherever, and you find 50,000 answers to your question, and nobody tells you what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's not true. Literacy has become about constructing knowledge, about managing, navigating ambiguity. Very, very different kind of skill set, much harder to learn, much harder to teach. And again, we are all connected, but as we know, the kind of digital tools are likely to connect with people who think like us, who work like us. It's actually more difficult than in the past for people to experience diversity. And you can see that half of young people in the PISA survey said they feel really bad if they're not connected. Being part of this digital world has become like breathing air and drinking water. And the time that young people spend online out of a typical school in some countries has doubled in just 3 years. The virtual world is becoming the real world. The virtual economy, the digital economy is becoming the economy. And at the workplace, you can see, and that was also made before, routine tasks are disappearing, tasks are low on ICT use are disappearing, and you put the picture together and you can see how the world of work is changing. In fact, you can put some numbers to this. You can see very well that routine cognitive skills, the kind of things that are easiest to teach, easiest to test, are disappearing fastest. And what is rising is your capacity to think imaginatively, creatively, in ways, solve complex problems, but also, and that's the green line, this is about social skills. Your capacity to collaborate, connect, and compete. How do we do on this? Now, one of the things we ask ourselves, how well actually are people in managing in this kind of complex digital world? We're not looking at computer programming or very sophisticated things. We just look at the capacity of people to manage in today's digital world. When you look at older people, now 55 to 64-year-olds, you find on average, about 1 in 10 people who is fit for today's, not tomorrow's, today's flat world. It varies a bit. A country like the United States is ahead, New Zealand as well, other countries are more behind, but you talk more or less, 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 5 people. And now you're going to tell me, well, that's all solved. Today's young people are digital natives, they have all those kinds of skills. But actually, if you look among 16 or 24-year-olds, you can see the bars are becoming longer, but still only every second young person you're going to meet out in the street has the capacity to navigate today's digital world. And you can see a country like the United States that used to be ahead is now at the bottom of the league. Not because things got worse, but because things got better so much faster elsewhere in the world. Now you can see Singapore. They used to be at the bottom, now they're at the top of the league. Had I had data on China and India, probably also. Those countries are simply a lot more dynamic when it comes to digital skills. Huge changes in this world. And of course, it has implications for the world of work. If you look at freelance workers, people actually who go what we still call non-standard work, what's probably going to be the standard work of tomorrow, exponential increases. Some people call this a race between technology and skills. In the past, before the big industrial revolution, neither technology nor education mattered much for the vast majority of people. But then came the Industrial Revolution. You can see technology moving ahead of people and causing huge amount of social pain. Today, we live on the Industrial Revolution, but you wouldn't have wanted to live in those times because most people were left out. But again, it was the age at which we invented universal public schooling, moving education ahead of technologies and generating generations of prosperity. But again, today, we have actually the same phenomenon. We have the digital revolution once again moving technology ahead of people and opening up this gap that actually is causing social pain. Young people leaving university with a degree who cannot find a job, and at the same time, employers say they cannot find the people with the skills they need. So the question really is closing this gap, developing those 21st century skills that are going to be important for society. Very last point. It's possible to build today's world-class school systems. We know how to do this. We can develop 21st century skills among young people. But think about this. People live longer, and actually most of those additional years are lived in good health. And the world is changing faster. So what this means in reality, we can do less and less in the first years of people's life, and we need to do more and more in the subsequent years of people's lives in developing those 21st century skills that are important to do now. We used to learn to do the work, and now learning has become the work, the central part of work for everyone. Now you say, well, go to training courses, MOOCs, everything is available, anybody can learn. People can decide what they learn, when they learn, where they learn, how they learn. This is the great digital world that we have today. But here's the reality. We looked at the OECD, in fact, who continues to learn throughout their lives. And then we looked at them by their social background and their initial skills. And what you can see very clearly here is that those who actually have advanced skills continue to learn, continue to expand, continue to develop their skills. But those who need it most actually get the least out of this lifelong learning possibilities that our societies provide today. That's the most fundamental challenge. It's not just about developing better institutions, but giving people a lot more ownership and the possibilities to upgrade their skills. Thank you very much.
So, I'd like to now invite Karina Autengruber, who's the president of the European Youth Forum, to come up onto stage. And the forum is a partner to this summit for the obvious reason of the importance. Welcome, Karina. The importance of including the voices of a younger generation of Europeans in this conversation. So welcome, Karina. I wonder what you see from the perspective of of someone of your generation, when you look at those projections for the future of work and perhaps more specifically for the future of jobs, what do you see when you look at those, and how does it make you feel?
Yeah, I think we see a lot of changes and challenges coming ahead of us as well. We see, especially when it comes to the labor market, previously we've seen generations who started their job and stayed in this profession for years, for centuries even, like 20, 30 years in the same profession. But nowadays, young people are more asked to be more flexible. And this, I think, has as well was enforced as well, through, for instance, through the financial crisis, where on the one hand, employers became more reluctant to hire young people or provide them with long-term contracts in order to ensure that they can remain competitive on a global scale. And on the other hand, it was also enforced through legislation, which was passed during this time as well, which was then meant to basically stimulate the economy as well. And I think this is kind of like something that young people are still stuck with, of not having this social protection which the labor market used to provide us. Yeah. Because we know that social security is very much attached to the labor market. If you want to have access to pensions, if you want to have access to healthcare services, very often this is attached to the labor market, and very often you need to have a stable contract as well, to finally actually access all these social protection rights as well. So I think there is a big challenge waiting for young people as well. And on the other hand, we've seen another shift as well, which is that new forms of work have been emerging as well. When we look, for instance, at the United Kingdom, 1 in 6 workers out there are currently working in the gig economy. So meaning, for instance, in Uber or other services. And a typical worker there is 25 years old, male. So it's also, again, like the young generation, which is affected by these jobs. But what comes here as well additionally is that only 2% of them are actually insured or have life insurance through the employer as well. And again, here we see like this gap that we see between the labor market and the social protection systems, which are rather a new phenomenon, which we need to work on.
And do you, from your members and the people who are part of your network, when you see that comparison between what people like me have, the benefits we've enjoyed and continue to enjoy, and the prospects for the future, is there a resentment, or do you think overall people have already factored that in?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, on the one hand, young people appreciate if we can be flexible, we have flexible working hours in the sense that we can choose on our own. Today is a sunny day. Today I choose to, I don't know, go to the swimming pool in summer or like use it for recreational purposes. But on the other hand, if we are asked to be flexible, of course, this is also like usually what is coming with this. And I think this is then more challenging for young people as well. But I think the main factor is that we need this access to social protection as well. So,
and is that one of the things, because I know that the forum has put together 10 ideas, I think, for the coming European elections. Is that one of them?
One of them is that governments need to further invest into quality jobs. Young people nowadays are very often stuck into working poor situations, so taking on 2 or 3 jobs in order to sustain themselves. So this is something where we need more investments as well, and where governments are asked to ensure that investments are being done. And again, like looking at the financial crisis, I think a lot of us have already forgotten what it has done to the generation or to young people in Europe in general. There have been like cuts in the education system in a lot of sectors where young people were active, or they have not been hired then because companies were reluctant to hire new people as well. And I think these are still like challenges out there, and that's why it's so important that now this investment is being made, and that's why European leaders need to stand up as well for young people in this field.
Rainer, I'm sure you would echo that call and feel that desire very keenly for there to be quality jobs of the future. But just explain how you see the role of the trade union membership in so many places is already on the decline. How does a trade union maintain its importance in a very different world of work?
To give you only one figure, certainly trade unions have much space to increase, but last year the 8 affiliates to the DGB got 360,000 new members, which means 1,000 a day. So we are one of the biggest interest groups in our society. But on the other hand, let's be honest, we are losing 1,000 members a day because they're going for retirement, unemployed, or for whatever reasons. The question for us is how we will be able to shape those transition of work, and there's only 2 aspects I like to address. The experiences young people make nowadays, that they have entirely different interests probably as my generation. Working time is much more important sometimes than salaries and income. They need to have much more time sovereignty. But how we can regulate this, that this is not only a one-way street for flexibility of companies, which gives also then space for time sovereignty and for security. And this is the second point. How we make sure that in the new world of work, in the digital economy, people will be covered of social security systems. And Mr. Snow has spoken about the old social contract. I can understand, I can follow a number of points you made. But by the end of the day, we need security. And security is also what young people are looking for. And the second important aspect you mentioned was training and education. We are well aware that if the world of work is changing so rapidly, we can't rely simply that we have made an apprenticeship and that will rest forever. So lifelong learning will be extremely important, but how we organize it and how can young people get a guarantee that they get time and payment for further training.
Andreas, I want to come to you on this question of lifelong learning in a moment, but just before that, Karina, I mean, Rainer says young people do want security. It's interesting because what you often hear from employers about their younger workers is that actually they only want to be there for a few years at a time. So do you think, I know it's a very big generalized statement, but maybe the concept of security is a little bit different between the generations.
I think security is still a very relevant topic for young people. I mean, we're well aware that if we're sick, we want to be protected as well. If we look for our pensions, we also want to have access to this. So I think this is not a question if it's a yes or no, but I think young people, what we're looking different in our workplaces now, that we're way more looking to values. So what is the company doing to stand up for sustainability? How is the company ensuring more inclusion? What is the company doing for gender equality? So I think these are kind of like new attributes that young people are looking in companies as well. And I think this is also where companies can make a difference, also like in their internal policies and how they make the workplace more accessible as well. And I think this is something we need to look into as well.
Yeah. And Andreas, you've written a whole book on the right school system for the age we live in. But isn't it hard to imagine a school system that could keep pace with what employers are looking for in this time? You'd have to, I mean, how often would you have to revamp the curriculum in order to achieve something like that?
You know, doing just what employers are looking for can be part of the problem, not the solution, in fact, actually. That keeps us always running behind the developments. I think the hard thing that schools really need to do these days in education is to think ahead, to educate people for jobs that have not been created, to use technologies that have not been invented, to solve social problems we cannot yet imagine. So I think that is very important. How can we do this? What is certainly not working is to continue to try to push, ideas from the top into school systems. Ministers of education do not know the future. They do not know what's going to be good for students. I think our best guarantee actually is, and this is where the digital world offers great opportunities, to rely on the good ideas on the front line, basically to get people who are doing education today, who are the world's teachers, to not only ask them to teach, but to become knowledge workers, researchers, designers, facilitators, coaches. And that's what we see in that. If I look at the most advanced education systems today in Europe, you would think about maybe Finland, the Netherlands. In Asia, you think about China, Singapore, North America, Canada. They have a very different work organization. They've moved away from the very industrial, heavy kind of industries that's very immobile towards a lot more flexibility.
But do you mean they give individual schools more freedom?
Yeah, just to give you one number. If you take a country like Germany, from all decisions that you take in education, 13% are taken at the front line. If you go to the neighboring country, the Netherlands, it will be 80%. It's a very different setup, a very different makeup, where you have a lot more agency at the front line, among students, among teachers, among school leaders. We have still very heavy industrial systems. So I think actually that is important. Empowerment is really key.
But can we say yet whether the second version, the sort of Dutch approach rather than the German approach, is better?
You look at the PISA results, you see big differences from the countries that are making progress. Those are systems that are looking upwards, where the next teacher looks to the next school, where the next school looks to the next system. And I think that is a very important attribute of a high-performing education system. And again, agency at the level of individuals is not just key for better education performance. It's very easy to teach people when they are in school, but what we need today is people who have the motivation, the capacity to continue learning throughout their lives, and that is something that you build.
Yeah, indeed, but I want to just come back, Karina, to you on this point about what you actually learn in school, because I'm always a little bit puzzled when when you hear often from employers about people coming out of schools and universities not having the skills they need, and then you think, but the younger generation are the most digital savvy. I mean, most people's children can do so many things that, that people my age can't do for themselves. So why is there that gap? Or do you think that gap is overstated?
Yeah, I mean, fact is that young people nowadays are also the most educated generation that this planet has actually ever seen. And before there was this example of Portugal and how they were developing the skills as well. But we also know that Portugal is one of the countries where a lot of people were forced or were asked actually to move away because they couldn't find any jobs there. So I think we also need to look at, on the one hand, what are the skills, but also like what the labor market is providing and if there are actually job offers for young people as well. But I think another point when it comes to education, which is important to mention as well, education is not only about employability. Education is about lifelong learning. Education is equipping us for skills to participate in society, to know how I find my way through society and all this kind of other aspects as well. And I think we should not forget this because this is kind of like the feeling how the discussion is often like shaped, that it's only focusing on employability. How can we get young people into the labor market as well? But education is a fundamental human right and we also need to address it as such. But still, of course, it's important as well that young people gain the necessary skills to access the labor market to education as well, and therefore sure there can be more done to have more digital education in schools as well. But of course this is not the only aspect. Formal education can do one part, but we also need to look at non-formal skills, so how we can ensure that young people manage to have social skills, how they can manage teams. So all of these kind of skills will become more and more important as well. While robots will take away the manufacturing parts, it's still important that we have all the social skills available as well. And I think this is also where civil society organizations make a lot of contributions as well, because especially young people learn in youth organizations how to manage teams, how to also gain like critical thinking skills, to assess also like this information that is on the internet there as well, because I mean there's the issue of fake news. And I think that's why it's also so important that we invest into the skills as well and support civil society organizations in this area.
Learning for citizenship or for good citizenship as well as other things. But at the further on in terms of a lifespan, Rainer and also Andreas, I wonder where in the world you see good examples of lifelong learning. For example, when you mentioned people losing their jobs and people who might have spent 20 years in a business but hoped it would be more like 35 and then found it came to an end. Where are the good examples where people have been retrained or reskilled into other lines of work?
Especially if you look to Europe, I think we still can learn very much from the Scandinavian countries, because people are much earlier retrained if they can monitor what will be the future of their job, what kind of qualifications will be needed for the future. I think they are much more advanced as we are in Germany. So there are good examples. On the other hand, we still have a good system in Germany, the apprenticeship system. Everybody is looking to Germany, how we are managing apprenticeships, which is quite special. And that is also to recognize that you have preconditions to guarantee that such an apprenticeship system works, because you need an employer, you need a company, you need social partners. It's not only a state-led system. And in the digital world, what you said earlier, where will be the employers in the future? If they are only hidden as an internet platform that don't accept their social responsibility for working contracts, for employmentship, they all declare those people who are working for Uber and others as so-called self-employed people. What are the systems then to give people a training? So we need to redefine the relationship, what is an employer in the digital world and what will be an employee nowadays.
Yeah, Andreas.
I think the apprenticeship system in Germany is very good to get people into jobs. I'm not so sure it's actually developing the kind of life work culture that you see in Scandinavia of moving upwards. What makes those countries that are successful different? 3 things. First of all, they are much better in recognizing the skills people have. No? They're not looking at your degree and your certificate, but the actual skills you have today. And they can be very different. I studied physics, I have a physics degree. I'm not working in that field. I will do a miserable job when you put them in the laboratory today. But I've learned a lot of other things. So those systems are much more sensitive to the actual skills people.
But when you say they're better at recognizing that, do you mean that they are more, that's an informal way, I
informal,
guess.
it can be formal actually. The skill systems they have are much more granular. They're not lumpy with big diplomas, but you continue to learn something and your employer is going to recognize this. There is actually a much greater sensitivity to learning. Your employer is also much more generous in allowing you to share working and learning. If you decide, you want to work 70%, actually your employer will facilitate this. There is actually, they have made learning everybody's business. The employers pay their part, the individual invests time and energy, tax systems actually facilitate that. So actually this is not by chance, it's actually by design that they're very good. Sweden has a lifelong learning participation rate of 40% in the adult workforce. That's several times of what you see in the rest of Europe.
Okay, so that means it's not like you go off and get a big degree course and you're recognized for it. You might do a night course and your employer will, it will be relevant.
Maybe I shouldn't say this in public, but degrees are often time and energy traps. You spend a lot of time, you get a big certificate, but at the end of the day, it's this ongoing learning, this moving towards not learning for your current jobs, but learning for your next job. Yeah. That's really important. Okay. And people, will not accept that they lose their job because a robot steals it if they don't feel prepared for the next one.
Okay. Karina, any idea about what your own future looks like? How many different, employers or jobs you might have? I don't know how the future looks to you.
Well, that's a difficult question, but I see it as well, like more and more that the digital is prevailing, and when people ask us, I think we already know that young people don't go online, but we are online. This is at least for most of us the case, and I think this will be also the case for the labor market as well, and that's why it's so important that young people are also part of shaping this discussion as well, and that we have the possibility to look at, okay, what kind of labor market do we want to see in the future as well, like what skills do we need for this? And I think this is why it's so important as well, like when we discuss the education system, to engage young people directly as well, and not only like employers and governments, but also like the group which is mostly affected by the system as well, but also engage young people when it comes, okay, how should a job market look like? And I think this is a crucial perspective, but what we hope to see as well, to see a more sustainable labor market in the future as well, with less waste production. So also like to use this technology to transform our societies for the better as well, to really ensure that we have sustainable system in place, to have social protection in place. And I think this is the direction that European leaders should take as well, and that companies also should lead in that direction.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. Karina Autengruber, Andreas Schleicher and Rainer Hoffmann. Thank you all. Thank you.